When a series of mysterious drownings haunt the aristocratic Blackwood family, Detective Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson join forces with the determined Jane Eyre to uncover a tangled web of secrets and betrayal. As tensions rise, the tragic death of a bride forces both families to confront their dark pasts. Can the truth lead to reconciliation, or will it deepen the divide? In a dramatic quest for justice and understanding, discover how the power of forgiveness can transform tragedy into hope. Will they honor the bride's memory and choose unity over revenge? The marsh whispered at dusk, its voice a low, guttural hiss that slithered through the reeds. Kaya Clark knelt by the water's edge, her fingers trailing through the brackish surface, feeling the pulse of the swamp, as if it were her own. The air was thick with the scent of decay, rotting leaves, fish bones, and something sweeter, unplaceable, that clung to the back of her throat. She'd always felt the marsh was alive, a creature with secrets buried deeper than its roots. Tonight, though, it felt different. It wasn't just alive. It was watching. Kaya's breath caught as a shadow flickered at the edge of her vision, too swift to be a heron or an alligator sliding into the water. She froze, her hand still in the murk, eyes scanning the horizon. The sun bled red into the North Carolina sky, painting the marsh in hues of fire and bruise. Nothing moved. Not a ripple, not a breeze. Yet the air pressed against her skin, heavy like the weight of unseen eyes. "Get a grip, Kaya," she muttered, shaking off the chill. She stood, brushing mud from her knees, and turned toward her shack. The weathered boards creaked under her. Steps. The only sound in a world gone unnaturally silent, no crickets, no frogs. Just the marsh's low, unending hum like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Inside, she lit the oil lamp, its weak glow casting jagged shadows across the walls. Her books, her lifelines, lined the shelves, their spines worn from years of solitary reading. She'd built this life alone, after the world and her family abandoned her. The marsh was her sanctuary, her teacher, her kin. But tonight it felt like a stranger. A sharp knock shattered the silence. Kaya's heart lurched. No one came here. Not to the marsh, not to her. She grabbed the rusted knife from the table, her grip tight, and crept to the door. The knock came again. 3 deliberate raps, each one echoing like a stone dropped into still water. "Who's there?" Her voice was steady, but her pulse thrummed in her ears. No answer. Only the hum of the marsh, louder now, insistent. She cracked the door open, knife raised, and peered into the twilight. A man stood on her porch, tall and lean, his face half hidden by the brim of a deerstalker hat. His coat was too fine for the swamp, its dark wool pristine despite the mud that sucked at his boots. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, locked onto hers, and Kaya felt a jolt, as if he'd seen straight through her skin, to the bones beneath. "Miss Kaya Clark?" His voice was precise, clipped, with an English accent that didn't belong in this wild place. "My name is Sherlock Holmes. I require your assistance." Kaya blinked, the knife still raised. "You're lost," she said flatly. "Ain't no one comes here unless they're lost." Holmes's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I assure you I am precisely where I intend to be, though I confess the journey was unconventional." Before Kaya could respond, a second figure emerged from the mist. A small, elderly woman in a tweed skirt and cardigan, her white hair pinned neatly under a modest hat. She carried a knitted bag, and her eyes sparkled with a warmth that felt oddly out of place in the marsh's oppressive gloom. "Oh, my dear," the woman said, her voice soft but clear. "You must forgive Mr. Holmes's abruptness. He's not one for pleasantries. I'm Miss Jane Marple from St. Mary Mead. We've come a very long way to find you." Kaya's grip on the knife tightened. "What do you want?" Her eyes darted between them, searching for a threat. The marsh had taught her to trust no one, especially not strangers who appeared without warning, their clothes untouched by the swamp's grime. Holmes stepped forward, his gaze never leaving her. We are here because of the marsh, Miss Clark. It is unwell, and you, I believe, are the only one who can help us understand why. Kaya's stomach twisted. The marsh's strange silence, the shadow she'd seen, the hum that pulsed like a warning. It wasn't her imagination. Something was wrong. But these two? A city man in a fancy coat and an old lady who looked like she belonged in a tea room? They didn't belong here. They didn't belong together. Why me? She asked, her voice low. And how do you know my name? Miss Marple smiled, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. My dear, we know a great deal about you. Your life here, your connection to this place, it's no accident we're standing on your doorstep. As for how we came to be here, well, that's a rather peculiar story. Peculiar, Holmes interjected, is an understatement. We were summoned, Miss Clark. Not by a person, but by something else. Something that defies logic, yet demands investigation. Kaya's skin prickled. The hum grew louder, vibrating in her chest. She glanced past them into the marsh. The shadows were thicker now, coiling like smoke, though the air remained still. Summoned by what? She asked, dreading the answer. Holmes's eyes narrowed. We don't know. Not yet. But it began with a letter, delivered to each of us in ways that should not be possible. It spoke of a darkness in the marsh, a threat that could spread beyond its borders. It named you, Miss Clark, as the key. A letter? Kaya's voice was sharp. Who sent it? Miss Marple's smile faded. There was no signature. Only a symbol, a circle, crossed with 3 lines. Like claw marks and a warning, the marsh wakes. Find Kaya Clark or all will drown. Kaya's breath hitched. She knew that symbol. She'd seen it years ago, carved into a cypress tree deep in the swamp, half hidden by moss. She'd thought it was a hunter's mark, or some old relic from the marsh's forgotten past. But the way the marsh felt tonight, alive, angry, wrong, made her wonder. Come inside, she said, lowering the knife but keeping it in hand. You're gonna tell me everything. The shack was cramped, its air thick with the scent of damp wood and kerosene. Kaya sat at the table, the knife within reach, while Holmes and Miss Marple took the only other chairs. The lamp flickered, casting their faces in sharp relief. Holmes's angular features, Marple's soft wrinkles, both unnervingly calm despite the marsh's growing unrest. Holmes began, his voice low and precise. 3 days ago, I received a letter at my lodgings in Baker Street. It was written in a hand I did not recognize, on paper that smelled of salt and decay. It described this marsh in vivid detail and warned of a hunger awakening within. It insisted I travel to North Carolina and seek you out. I dismissed it as a prank until I found myself here. Kaya frowned. Found yourself? Holmes's jaw tightened. I stepped through my door in London and emerged here, in the marsh. The transition was instantaneous, inexplicable. I am a man of reason, Miss Clark, but this defies all rational explanation. Miss Marple nodded, her hands folded neatly in her lap. My experience was much the same, my dear. I was tending my roses in St. Mary Mead when a fog rolled in, most unusual for the season. I followed a path I thought led to my gate, but instead I found myself standing among these reeds, with that dreadful letter in my hand. Kaya's heart pounded. And the letter said I'm the key? Why me? Holmes leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. You are part of this marsh, Miss Clark. You know its rhythms, its secrets. Whatever is stirring here, it is connected to you. The letter was explicit. She who speaks to the marsh holds the truth. Kaya's throat tightened. She'd always felt the marsh was more than a place. It was a living thing, with a voice only she could hear. But now that voice was changing, growing darker, hungrier. She wanted to deny it, to send these strangers away and return to her solitary life. But the marsh's hum was louder now, rattling the shack's windows, and she knew she couldn't ignore it. Tell me about this darkness, she said. What's it doing? Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made Kaya's skin crawl. It's not just the marsh, my dear. It's what's beneath it. The letter spoke of a presence, something ancient, buried long ago. It's waking now, and it's feeding. Feeding? Kaya's voice was barely a whisper. Holmes's expression darkened. The letter mentioned disappearances, people vanishing near the marsh, their bodies never found. But there are signs, marks in the mud, like claw scratches, and a smell, like rot and blood. I've seen such signs already, on my way to your door. Kaya's mind raced. She'd heard rumors in town, fishermen gone missing, boats found empty, drifting in the channels. She'd dismissed them as gossip. But now, she stood, crossing to the window. The marsh was shrouded in fog, the reeds barely visible. The hum was louder, almost a growl, and the shadows seemed to pulse as if the marsh itself were breathing. I've seen things too, she admitted, her voice low. Shadows that move too fast, sounds that don't belong, and that symbol. The claw marks, it's out there in the swamp. Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. Show us. The marsh was a different beast at night. The fog thickened as Kaya led Holmes and Miss Marple through the reeds, her lantern casting a feeble glow. The air was heavy, pressing against their skin, and the hum vibrated through the ground, making the mud quiver under their feet. Kaya moved with the ease of someone born to this place, her steps silent, while Holmes scanned the surroundings, his eyes darting to every shadow. Miss Marple followed, her steps surprisingly steady for her age, her knitted bag clutched tightly. This way, Kaya said, pointing to a narrow path that wound deeper into the swamp. The tree's about a mile in. It's where I saw the symbol. Holmes nodded, his hand resting on a small pistol in his coat pocket. Stay alert. Whatever summoned us here is not benevolent. Miss Marple's voice was calm, but her words chilled Kaya. In my village we have stories of old things, spirits you might call them, that linger in forgotten places. They're not always evil, but they're never kind. This feels like one of those. Kaya didn't respond. She didn't need to. The marsh was speaking for her, its hum now a low guttural chant that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The reeds parted, revealing a gnarled cypress tree, its roots clawing into the mud like skeletal hands. Carved into its trunk was the symbol, a circle crossed with 3 jagged lines glistening as if freshly cut. Holmes knelt, examining the marks. Recent, the wood is still damp. This was done within the last day. Kaya's stomach churned. I saw it years ago, it can't be new. Holmes's eyes met hers. Then it's been reopened. By something or someone. Miss Marple gasped softly, pointing to the ground. Oh, my dear, look. In the mud, half hidden by the roots, were footprints, not human, not animal. They were long, clawed, with an extra digit that made Kaya's skin crawl. The prints led into the water, disappearing beneath the black surface. The hum stopped. The silence was worse. It pressed against Kaya's ears, thick and suffocating, like the moment before a scream. The fog swirled, and for a moment she thought she saw a shape in the water, tall, hunched, its limbs too long, its eyes glinting like oil slicks. Holmes drew his pistol. Miss Clark, step back. Kaya didn't move. She couldn't. The shape was gone, but the water rippled, as if something massive had shifted beneath it. The air grew colder, the smell of rot stronger, and Kaya's heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst. We need to leave, Miss Marple said, her voice steady but urgent. Now. Kaya nodded, her eyes still on the water. This way. They retraced their steps, the marsh closing in around them. The fog thickened, the lantern's light barely piercing it. Every rustle, every splash made Kaya's nerves scream. She knew the marsh, knew its sounds, but these were foreign. Low, guttural whispers that seemed to follow them, circling like predators. Back at the shack, Kaya barred the door, her hands shaking. Holmes stood by the window, his pistol still drawn, while Miss Marple sat, her eyes scanning the room as if expecting the shadows to move. What was that? Kaya asked, her voice hoarse. Holmes's jaw was tight. I don't know, but it's aware of us, and it's not pleased. Miss Marple's voice was soft, almost a whisper. It's old, my dear. Older than the marsh, older than us. And it's hungry? Kaya sank into a chair, her mind racing. The marsh had always been her home, her refuge. But now it was something else, something alive, something angry. And these strangers, this man of logic and this woman of quiet wisdom, were her only allies against it. We need to find out what it is, Holmes said, his voice cutting through the silence. And we need to do it quickly. The marsh is waking, Miss Clark, and it will not sleep again until it's fed. Kaya met his gaze, her fear hardening into resolve. Then we fight it. Together. The hum returned, louder now, shaking the shack's walls. Outside, the marsh waited, its shadows coiling, its secrets stirring. And somewhere, deep beneath the water, something ancient opened its eyes. Chapter 2. A mysterious summons. The shack trembled under the marsh's relentless hum, a sound that burrowed into Kaya's bones like a parasite. The air inside was thick, heavy with the scent of damp wood and something fouler, something that clung to the edges of her senses, rotting flesh perhaps, or the metallic tang of blood. The lantern flickered, casting jagged shadows that danced across the walls, as if the marsh itself were pressing in, trying to claw its way inside. Kaya sat at the table, her knife still within reach, her eyes darting between Sherlock Holmes and Miss Jane Marple. The strangers sat opposite her, their faces lit by the dim glow. Holmes's sharp features taut with focus, Marple's soft wrinkles masking a quiet intensity. They were an odd pair, out of place in her world of mud and reeds, yet they carried an air of purpose that matched the marsh's growing unrest. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the stars, and the hum pulsed louder, like a chant from some forgotten tongue. "We need to see the letter," Kaya said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her gut. "The one that brought you here." Holmes reached into his coat, producing a folded piece of parchment. It was yellowed, brittle, as if it had been pulled from the earth rather than a postbox. He slid it across the table, and Kaya's fingers hesitated before touching it. The paper felt wrong, cold, damp, like the skin of something long dead. She unfolded it, her breath catching at the sight of the words scrawled in black ink, jagged and uneven, as if written by a trembling hand. "The marsh wakes. Find Kaya Clark, or all. Will drown. The hunger stirs beneath the roots in the place where the water forgets. Seek the claw-marked tree. Beware the eyes that see without light." Below the words was the symbol, a circle crossed with 3 jagged lines, identical to the one carved into the cypress tree. Kaya's pulse quickened. She'd seen that symbol years ago, dismissed it as a relic, but now it stared back at her, alive with menace. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice low. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "It appeared on my desk in Baker Street 3 nights ago. No envelope, no postmark, just the letter reeking of the marsh. I assumed it was a hoax until I stepped through my door and found myself here." Miss Marple nodded, her hands folded tightly around her knitted bag. "Mine was much the same, my dear. It was tucked into my prayer book of all places during a quiet evening in St. Mary Mead. I thought it a prank, perhaps from one of the village boys, but then the fog came, and I was here." Kaya's fingers traced the symbol, her skin prickling, and it said to find me. "Why?" Holmes leaned forward, his voice cutting through the hum. "You are the marsh's voice, Miss Clark. You've lived here alone for years. You know its secrets, its rhythms. Whatever this hunger is, it's tied to you. The letter is clear. You are the key." Kaya's throat tightened. She'd always felt the marsh was alive, a partner in her solitude, but now it felt like a predator watching her with eyes she couldn't see. "I don't know any hunger," she said, but her voice wavered. "I just live here. I don't mess with things I don't understand." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but there was a sharpness beneath her kindness. "My dear, Sometimes the things we don't understand find us. In my village, we have tales of old spirits, things that linger in the earth waiting for a reason to wake. This feels like one of those. And it's chosen you. The hum surged, rattling the shack's windows. Kaya flinched, her eyes darting to the door. The fog outside was so thick it seemed to press against the glass, its tendrils curling, like fingers. "Chosen me for what?" she asked, dreading the answer. Holmes's expression darkened. To either stop it or feed it. A chill ran through Kaya. She stood pacing to the window, her reflection distorted in the warped glass. The marsh was invisible now, swallowed by the fog, but she felt it. Alive, angry, waiting. The memory of the clawed footprints by the cypress tree flashed in her mind, and she shivered. "You said there were disappearances," she said, turning to Holmes. "What do you know about them?" Holmes's fingers steepled, his gaze distant. The letter mentioned vanishings, fishermen, hunters, travelers, all near the marsh. No bodies, no traces, just empty boats and abandoned gear. The locals speak of a curse, but I deal in facts, not folklore. On my way here, I found signs, scratches in the mud, like the ones by the tree, and a stench that wasn't natural. Something is taking them, Miss Clark. And it's not human. Miss Marple's voice was soft, almost a whisper. In St. Mary. Mead, we'd call it a haunting, but this is something older. Something that doesn't belong to our world. Kaya's stomach churned. She'd heard the town's whispers, stories of the marsh ghost, a tale to scare children. But the footprints, the symbol, the hum, they were real. And now these strangers, pulled from their lives to hers, were part of it too. "We need to go back," Kaya said, her voice firm despite the fear clawing at her. "To the tree. If that's where this started, we need to know more." Holmes nodded, his hand resting on the pistol in his pocket. "Agreed, but we go prepared. Whatever summoned us is watching, and it's not pleased we're here." Miss Marple stood, her knitted bag clutched tightly. "I'll bring my wits, Mr. Holmes, and perhaps a prayer or two. We'll need both." The marsh was a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Kaya led the way, her lantern cutting through the fog, though its light seemed to drown in the thick air. The hum was constant now, a low growl that vibrated through the mud, making each step feel like wading through a living thing. Holmes followed close behind, his eyes scanning the reeds while Miss Marple kept pace, her steps light but deliberate, her gaze darting to every rustle. The path to the cypress tree was familiar to Kaya, but tonight it felt alien, the reeds twisting into shapes that didn't belong, faces, hands, eyes that vanished when she looked directly. The air grew colder, the smell of rot stronger, and the hum took on a rhythm like words she couldn't quite hear. "Stay close," Kaya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The marsh plays tricks at night." Holmes's voice was sharp. "These are no tricks, Miss Clark. The footprints we saw, they're not animal. The proportions are wrong, the weight uneven. Something walks here that shouldn't." Miss Marple's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made Kaya's skin crawl. "In my village, we'd say it's a thing that walks between worlds. Not alive, not dead, but something else. Something that feeds on fear." Kaya's heart pounded. She wanted to argue, to cling to the marsh she knew, but the hum was louder now, and the shadows moved in ways that defied reason. They reached the cypress tree, its gnarled roots clawing into the mud, the symbol glowing faintly in the lantern's light, as if it had absorbed the darkness. Holmes knelt, examining the footprints again. "They're deeper now," he said, his voice tense. "Something heavy passed through here, recently." Kaya's eyes followed the prints into the water. The surface was still, but the hum was deafening, shaking the ground beneath her feet. She stepped closer, her lantern held high, and froze. In the water's reflection, she saw it, a shape, tall and hunched, its limbs too long, its head featureless except for eyes that burned like oil slicks. It was there and gone in an instant, but the water rippled, as if something massive had moved beneath it. "Did you see that?" Kaya whispered, her voice trembling. Holmes was on his feet, pistol drawn. "I saw nothing, but I felt it. We're not alone." Miss Marple's hand gripped Kaya's arm, her voice urgent. "My dear, we mustn't linger. It knows we're here." The hum surged, a scream now splitting the air. The fog coiled tighter and the reeds began to sway, though there was no wind. Kaya's lantern flickered, then died, plunging them into darkness. The only light came from the symbol on the tree, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Run!" Kaya shouted, grabbing Miss Marple's hand. They stumbled back through the marsh, the hum chasing them, the shadows twisting into claws that reached from the fog. Holmes fired his pistol into the darkness, the sound swallowed by the marsh's roar. Kaya didn't look back, but she felt it, eyes on her, hungry, ancient, pulling at her soul. They reached the shack, slamming the door behind them. Kaya barred it, her hands shaking while Holmes reloaded his pistol and Miss Marple clutched her bag, muttering a prayer under her breath. The hum was quieter now, but it lingered, a promise of return. What was that? Kaya gasped, her back against the door. Holmes's face was grim. Something that doesn't belong in this world. But it's here, and it's growing stronger. Miss Marple's eyes were wide, her voice soft but firm. "It's been summoned, my dear, and I fear we've only seen the beginning." Kaya sank to the floor, her mind racing. The marsh was her home, her sanctuary, but now it was a prison, and something was waking within it, something that knew her name. She looked at Holmes and Marple, strangers bound to her by a letter and a curse, and knew they were her only hope. "We need answers," she said, her voice hardening. "Tomorrow we go deeper, into the heart of the marsh." Holmes nodded, his eyes gleaming with determination. "Agreed, but we must be ready. Whatever this is, it's not just in the marsh, it's in us now." The hum pulsed once, then fell silent, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the weight of the darkness. Outside. Chapter 3. The Marshland. Enigma. The marsh was silent at dawn, but it was the kind of silence that screamed. No birds sang, no frogs croaked. Only a stillness so deep it felt like the world was holding its breath. Kaya Clark stood on her porch, the morning mist curling around her ankles like ghostly fingers. The air was thick with the stench of rot, stronger now, laced with something metallic, like blood left to congeal. The shack's walls still trembled faintly from the night's a reminder that the marsh was no longer hers. It was awake and it was angry. Inside, Sherlock Holmes paced by the window, his sharp eyes scanning the fog-shrouded reeds. His deerstalker hat was discarded on the table, revealing dark hair streaked with sweat. Miss Jane Marple sat quietly, her knitted bag in her lap, her fingers tracing the edges of a small prayer book. The letter, the cursed thing that had brought them here, lay open on the table, its claw-marked symbol staring up like an accusing eye. "We can't stay here," Kaya said, her voice low but firm. "Whatever's out there, it's not gonna wait for us to figure it out. We need to go deeper, to the heart of the marsh." Holmes stopped pacing, his gaze locking onto hers. "Agreed, Miss Clark, but we must proceed with caution. The entity we encountered last night, whatever it is, knows we're hunting it. And it's hunting us." Miss Marple's voice was soft, almost drowned by the creak of the shack's boards. "In my village, we'd say it's a thing that feeds on fear. The more we dread it, the stronger it grows. We must be resolute, my dear, or it will consume us all." Kaya's stomach twisted. She'd spent her life in the marsh, learning its secrets, its rhythms, its quiet violence. But this was different. The hum, the footprints, the shape in the water. It was as if the marsh had turned against her, revealing a face she'd never seen. She glanced at the letter. Its words burned into her mind. "The hunger stirs beneath the roots in the place where the water forgets." Whatever that meant, it was out there, waiting. "We'll need supplies," Kaya said, moving to a corner of the shack where she kept her gear. She packed a satchel with rope, a flashlight, a small hatchet, and a jar of dried herbs. Old remedies her mother had taught her, though she doubted they'd help against whatever stalked the marsh. The heart of the marsh is a maze. Channels twist, islands vanish. If we get lost, we're done. Holmes nodded, slipping his pistol into his coat. "I've mapped worse terrains, Miss Clark. but I suspect this marsh defies conventional navigation. The letter mentioned a place where the water forgets. Any idea what that could mean? Kaya hesitated, her mind sifting through memories of the swamp. There's a spot deep in the marsh where the water's different. Still like glass, even when the tide moves. The locals call it the dead pool. Ain't no fish there, no plants, just nothing. I've never gone close. It never felt right. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her voice tinged with unease. A place like that, my dear, is often where old things hide. Things that don't belong to the living. Holmes's lips twitched, not quite a smile. Then that's where we start. Lead the way, Miss Clark. The marsh was a different beast in daylight, but no less menacing. The fog lingered, a gray shroud that muted the sun's weak rays. Kaya navigated the narrow channels in her small boat, the oars cutting through water that seemed thicker, heavier as if it resisted her. Holmes sat at the bow, his eyes scanning the horizon while Miss Marple perched in the stern, her prayer book open but unread, her gaze fixed on the reeds. The hum was back, softer now, a low murmur that pulsed beneath the boat. The air grew colder. As they ventured deeper, the smell of rot so strong it made Kaya's eyes water. The reeds loomed taller, their tips sharp as blades, and the shadows between them moved in ways that made her skin crawl. Fleeting glimpses of limbs, eyes, faces that vanished when she blinked. This place is alive, Holmes muttered, his voice low. Not in the biological sense, but aware. I've felt it before in certain cases, but never like this. Miss Marple nodded, her fingers tightening on her book. It's watching us, Mr. Holmes. I've seen it in people. Eyes that see too much, know too much. This marsh has those eyes. Kaya said nothing, her focus on the channel ahead. The marsh had always been her ally, her teacher, but now it felt like a stranger, its secrets turning hostile. She steered around a bend, and the dead pool came into view, a wide, glassy expanse of water untouched by ripples reflecting the fog like a mirror. The surrounding reeds were stunted, blackened, as if burned by something unseen. The air here was colder, the silence absolute, broken only by the faint hum that seemed to come from the water itself. This is it, Kaya said, her voice barely a whisper. The dead pool. Holmes leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. No, wildlife. No movement. The water's viscosity is unnatural. It should be flowing with the tide. He dipped a hand into the pool, then recoiled, his fingers dripping with a black, oily substance that wasn't water. This is not natural. Miss Marple's voice was sharp with alarm. Look, my dear. There, in the mud. Kaya followed her, gazed to the bank where fresh footprints marred the earth, clawed too long with that unnatural extra digit. They circled the pool, dozens of them, as if something had paced here for hours. And at the center of the bank, half buried in the mud, was another symbol, a circle with 3 jagged lines, larger than the one on the cypress tree, its edges glistening with the same black oil Holmes had touched. Kaya's heart pounded. It's been here, she said, her voice trembling. Recent. Holmes stood, his pistol drawn. More than recent. It's still here. The hum surged, a guttural roar that shook the boat. The water in the dead pool rippled. No, it writhed, as if something massive stirred beneath. Kaya gripped the oars, her knuckles white, as a shape rose in the reflection. A hunched figure, its limbs twisted, its eyes glinting like polished obsidian. It was there and gone in a heartbeat, but the water churned now, black oil bubbling to the surface, releasing a stench that made Kaya gag. "Row!" Holmes shouted, aiming his pistol at the water. "Get us to the bank!" Kaya pulled the oars, her muscles burning, but the boat moved sluggishly, as if the water clung to it. The hum became a scream, splitting the air, and the fog thickened, swallowing the reeds. Miss Marple clutched her prayer book, muttering words Kaya couldn't hear, her face pale but resolute. They reached the bank, stumbling onto the mud. Holmes fired into the water, the shot swallowed by the hum. The footprints were everywhere now, overlapping, chaotic, as if a horde had circled the pool. Kaya's flashlight flickered, its beam catching something in the mud. A small, glinting object half buried beside the symbol. She knelt, digging it out with her hatchet. It was a locket, silver and tarnished, its chain broken. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, her eyes wide with fear. Kaya's breath caught. She knew that face. Lila, a girl from town who'd vanished last summer, her boat found drifting, empty. Lila, Kaya whispered, her voice breaking. She was here. Holmes took the locket, his expression grim. This is no coincidence. The entity is leaving markers, taunting us. Miss Marple's voice was steady, but her eyes were wide. It's not just taunting, Mr. Holmes. It's claiming this place, these people. It's marking its territory. The hum surged again and the ground trembled. Kaya stumbled, catching herself on the symbol-carved mud. The black oil oozed around her fingers, cold and alive, and for a moment she heard it. Words in the hum, ancient and guttural, speaking a language she didn't know but understood. You are mine. She yanked her hand back, her heart racing. We need to go, she said, her voice hoarse. Now. Holmes nodded, his pistol still raised. Back to the boat. We need to regroup, analyze what we've found. But as they turned, the fog parted, revealing a figure on the opposite bank. It was tall, hunched, its limbs too long, its head featureless except for those burning eyes. It stood motionless, watching, and the hum pulsed in time with Kaya's heartbeat. Then it stepped into the water, vanishing beneath the surface without a ripple. The boat was gone. Kaya's stomach dropped. The channel where they'd left it was empty, the water still as glass. The hum laughed now, a low, mocking sound that echoed through the fog. They were stranded, surrounded by the dead pool, with the footprints closing in and the eyes of the marsh watching from every shadow. We're not alone, Miss Marple whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. Holmes's jaw tightened. We never were. Kaya gripped her hatchet, her fear hardening into resolve. The marsh was her home and she'd fight for it. We walk, she said, her voice steady. There's an old path, leads to a ridge. It's a long way, but we can make it. Holmes nodded, his eyes scanning the fog. Lead on, Miss Clark, but stay sharp. It's playing with us now. As they moved, the hum followed, a predator's song, and the shadows twisted into shapes that whispered Kaya's name. The marsh was awake, and it was hungry. Chapter 4. Clues in the Fog. The fog was a living thing, coiling around Kaya Clark like a serpent, its cold tendrils brushing her skin with a touch that felt too deliberate. The marsh stretched endlessly before her, its reeds sharp as knives, its channels hidden in a gray shroud that swallowed sound and sight. The hum was ever present, a low guttural pulse that vibrated through the mud, whispering words Kaya couldn't quite grasp. Promises, threats, or something worse. Her flashlight flickered, its beam barely piercing the mist, and her hatchet hung heavy in her hand. A frail defense against the marsh's growing malice. Sherlock Holmes walked beside her, his pistol drawn, his eyes cutting through the fog like a blade. His coat was streaked with mud now, the pristine wool tarnished by the swamp's relentless grip. Miss Jane Marple followed, her steps careful but steady, her knitted bag clutched tightly, as if it held more than just a prayer book. The loss of the boat had stranded them, forcing them onto an old, overgrown path Kaya knew only from childhood, a trail that led to a ridge overlooking the marsh's heart, a place she'd avoided since she was a girl. We're exposed here, Holmes said, his voice low, precise. The entity knows this terrain better than we do. It's hurting us. Kaya's stomach twisted. Hurting us where? Holmes's gaze flicked to the fog, where shadows flickered just beyond sight. To a place of its choosing. The dead pool. Was a warning, Miss Clark. It wanted us to see it, to fear it. Now it's guiding us deeper. Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made Kaya's skin crawl. In St. Mary Mead, we'd say it's a hunter, my dear. Not for sport, but for something it needs, and I fear we're the prey. Kaya gripped her hatchet tighter, her eyes scanning the fog. The path was narrow, bordered by black water and stunted reeds that seemed to lean closer with every step. The air was thick with the stench of rot, now mingled with something sweeter, like overripe fruit or decaying flowers. The hum pulsed louder, its rhythm erratic like a heartbeat skipping in panic. She knew this marsh, every channel, every root. But now it felt alien, its familiar contours twisted into something predatory. "We're close to the ridge," Kaya said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "It's high ground. We can see the whole marsh from there. Maybe figure out what's happening." Holmes nodded, his pistol sweeping the shadows. "We need evidence, tangible clues. The footprints, the locket, the symbol, they're pieces of a puzzle, but we're missing the center." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. "The center, Mr. Holmes, is what's beneath." The letter spoke of a hunger beneath the roots. Whatever this is, it's older than the marsh, older than us. And it's waking because something or someone called it. Kaya's breath hitched. The letter's words echoed in her mind. She who speaks to the marsh holds the truth. She'd always felt the marsh was alive, a companion in her solitude, but now it was a stranger, its voice turned hostile. The locket from the dead pool, Lila's locket, burned in her pocket, a reminder of the marsh's victims. She didn't know Lila well, just a girl from town who'd laughed too loud and loved the wrong boy. But her face in that photograph, wide-eyed and terrified, was a warning Kaya couldn't ignore. The path grew narrower, the mud sucking at their boots. The fog thickened and the hum took on a new tone, sharper, hungrier, like a chant building to a crescendo. Kaya's flashlight flickered again, then died, plunging them into a gray twilight where the shadows moved with purpose. She froze, her heart pounding as a shape darted through the fog. Tall, hunched, its limbs too long, its eyes glinting like oil slicks. It was gone in an instant, but the reeds rustled, and the hum laughed, a low, guttural sound that curled around her spine. "Did you see it?" Kaya whispered, her voice trembling. Holmes's pistol snapped up, aimed at nothing. "I saw movement. Not enough to identify, but it's close." Miss Marple's hand touched Kaya's arm, her voice calm but urgent. "Keep moving, my dear. It wants us to stop, to panic. We mustn't give it that." Kaya nodded, forcing her legs to move. The path climbed now, the ground firmer but no less treacherous, littered with roots that seemed to shift underfoot. The fog parted briefly, revealing the ridge ahead, a low rise of earth crowned with twisted oaks, their branches clawing at the sky. But something was wrong. The trees were wrong, their bark blackened, their leaves gone, replaced by a glistening web of black oil that dripped like blood. "We're here," Kaya said, her voice barely audible over the hum. "The ridge." Holmes stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he examined the trees. "This is no natural phenomenon. The oil, it's the same substance from the dead pool. It's spreading." Miss Marple knelt, her fingers brushing the ground. And look, more marks. Kaya's flashlight flickered back to life, its beam catching a cluster of symbols carved into the earth, circles with 3 jagged lines, dozens of them, radiating from a central point like a spider's web. At the center was a stone, half buried, its surface etched with the same symbol, but larger, deeper, the lines filled with that black oil. The hum pulsed in time with Kaya's heartbeat, and for a moment she heard it again, words, ancient and guttural, whispering her name. "Kaya. Mine." She stumbled back, her hatchet raised. "What is this place?" Holmes's voice was grim. "A focal point, a nexus. Whatever's waking in the marsh, this is where it's strongest." Miss Marple's eyes widened, her voice soft but sharp. "It's a shrine, Mr. Holmes, not to a god but to something else, something that demands offerings." Kaya's mind raced. Offerings, Lila's locket, the disappearances, the footprints. "You think it's taking people?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Feeding on them?" Holmes's jaw tightened. "The evidence suggests it. The locket was a marker, left deliberately. This entity, It's not just killing, it's claiming. The hum surged, a scream now, shaking the ridge. The fog coiled tighter, and the trees began to move. Not sway, but move, their branches twisting like limbs, their oil dripping faster, pooling in the symbols on the ground. Kaya's flashlight died again, and the darkness closed in, thick and suffocating, broken only by the faint glow of the oil-filled carvings. "Stay together," Holmes said, his pistol sweeping the shadows. "It's here." Kaya's heart pounded, her hatchet trembling in her hand. The hum was everywhere, a chorus of voices now, chanting in a language that clawed at her mind. The fog parted and she saw it, a shape on the ridge, tall and hunched. Its limbs too long, its head featureless except for those burning eyes. It stood motionless, watching, its presence a weight that crushed the air from her lungs. Then it spoke. Not with words, but with the hum, a sound that burrowed into Kaya's skull, filling it with images. Dark water, twisted roots, bodies sinking into the mud, their eyes wide with terror. Lila's face flashed among them, her mouth open in a silent scream. Kaya gasped, dropping her hatchet, her hands clutching her head as the hum grew louder, drowning out her thoughts. Holmes grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Miss Clark, stay with us." Miss Marple's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Begone, foul thing, you have no claim here." The hum faltered just for a moment and the shape vanished, swallowed by the fog. But the oil in the carvings pulsed and the ground trembled, as if the marsh itself were laughing. Kaya's vision cleared, but the images lingered. Lila, the others, their faces etched in her mind. "We can't stay here," Kaya said, her voice shaking. "It's too strong." Holmes nodded, his pistol still raised. "We retreat, for now. But we take what we've found, the stone, the symbols, their clues. We need to understand their purpose." Miss Marple knelt, pulling a small knife from her bag and scraping a sample of the black oil into a handkerchief. "This will tell us something, I'm sure, but we must be quick, Mr. Holmes, it's watching." They moved down the ridge, the fog closing in behind them. The hum followed, softer now but no less menacing, a predator pacing its prey. Kaya led them along the path, her heart pounding, the locket in her pocket a heavy reminder of the marsh's hunger. The symbols, the stone, the shape, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture they formed was one of terror, and Kaya knew they were running out of time to solve it. As they reached the marsh's edge, the fog parted, revealing her shack in the distance. But something was wrong. The door was open, swinging in the windless air, and the hum laughed again, whispering her name. Chapter 5. The Village Whisper. The shack's open door gaped like a wound, swinging on its hinges in the still air. Kaya Clark's heart thudded as she approached, her hatchet gripped tightly, the weight of Lila's locket burning in her pocket. The fog clung to the marsh, a gray veil that muffled sound but amplified the hum, a low, insidious chant that seemed to seep from the ground itself, whispering her name in a language older than the earth. The marsh was no longer her sanctuary. It was a predator, and it had let itself into her home. Sherlock Holmes moved ahead, his pistol drawn, his eyes scanning the shadows within the shack. His coat was mud-streaked, his face taut with focus, but there was a flicker of unease in his sharp gaze, something Kaya hadn't seen before. Miss Jane Marple followed, her knitted bag clutched tightly, the handkerchief containing the black oil from the ridge tucked inside. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a quiet resolve, as if she'd seen darkness before and refused to flinch. "Stay behind me," Holmes said, his voice low and clipped. "Whatever opened that door may still be inside." Kaya nodded, her throat tight. The hum pulsed louder, vibrating through the porch boards, and the air carried a stench of rot and something sweeter, like decaying flowers laced with blood. She stepped inside, her flashlight flickering, its beam catching the chaos within. Her books were scattered across the floor, pages torn and smeared with black oil. The table was overturned, the letter with its claw-marked symbol pinned to the wall by a splintered bone, human by the look of it, still glistening with flesh. Kaya's stomach churned. "This wasn't an animal," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's playing with us." Holmes knelt by the bone, examining it without touching. A femur recently broken. The marrow's exposed, but there's no blood. Whatever did this took its time. His voice was steady, but his fingers tightened on his pistol. "This is a message." Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it cut through the hum like a blade. "It's a warning, Mr. Holmes. In St. Mary Mead, we'd say this is a spirit marking. It's ground. But this is no spirit. It's something older, hungrier." Kaya's eyes darted to the letter on the wall. The words seemed to writhe in the flickering light. The hunger stirs beneath the roots in the place where the water forgets. Below the symbol, new words were scrawled in black oil, jagged and uneven. "Come to the village. See what I have taken." "The village," Kaya said, her voice hoarse. "Barkley Cove. It's the closest town, maybe a mile from here. People there, they've always whispered about the marsh, called it cursed. Maybe they know something." Holmes stood, his jaw tight. "Then we go to Barkley Cove. If this entity is taking people, the villagers will have seen signs. We need witnesses, evidence, something to anchor this madness in fact." Miss Marple nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her prayer book. "But we must be careful, my dear. A village keeps its secrets close, especially when fear is involved. They may not welcome us, or our questions." Kaya's mind raced. Barkley Cove had never been kind to her, the marsh girl they mocked and shunned. But Lila had come from there, and others had vanished. Fishermen, drifters, people the town barely mourned. If the marsh was feeding, the village was its larder. "We don't have a choice," she said, her voice hardening. "If it's calling us there, we go." The path to Barkley Cove was a winding trail through the marsh, its mud slick with oil that shimmered in the weak sunlight. The fog lingered, curling around the reeds like smoke, and the hum followed, a low growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Kaya led the way, her hatchet at her side, her senses sharpened by years of surviving alone. Holmes scanned the surroundings, his pistol ready, while Marple's steps were steady, her eyes darting to every shadow, as if reading the marsh like one of her village mysteries. The air grew heavier as they neared the village, the stench of rot now mixed with smoke and salt. The hum took on a new rhythm, almost words, chanting in a tongue that clawed at Kaya's mind. "Mine, mine, mine." She shook it off, focusing on the path, but the locket in her pocket felt heavier, as if Lila's fear had seeped into the metal. Barkley Cove emerged from the fog, a cluster of weathered buildings huddled against the marsh's edge. The docks were silent, no boats moored, no fishermen calling out. The streets were empty, the windows shuttered, and the air carried a hush that felt wrong, like a town holding its breath. Kaya's skin prickled. She'd seen the village quiet before, but never like this. Never so dead. "Where is everyone?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Hiding, or gone. Either way, this is no ordinary silence." Miss Marple's voice was calm, but sharp. "Look at the ground, my dear." Kaya followed her gaze. The dirt road was scarred with footprints, clawed, too long with that unnatural extra digit. They crisscrossed the street, circling the general store, the church, the tavern. And there, on the church door, was the symbol. A circle with 3 jagged lines carved deep, dripping with black oil. "They've been here," Kaya said, her heart pounding. "All over the village." Holmes approached the church, his pistol raised. "This is a focal point like the ridge. The entity is marking its territory, claiming this place." Miss Marple's hand tightened on her bag. "And the people, Mr. Holmes. It's claiming them too." Kaya pushed open the church door, the creak echoing in the empty street. Inside, the air was cold, thick with the smell of oil and something worse. Blood, fresh and coppery. The pews were overturned, hymnals scattered, their pages smeared with black. At the altar, a pile of bones gleamed in the dim light, arranged in a circle around another symbol, this one painted in blood and oil. Kaya's breath caught. The bones were human, some still clinging to scraps of flesh. and among them was a fisherman's cap she recognized. Tom's, a man who'd vanished. Last month. They're gone, she whispered, her voice breaking. It's taking them. Holmes knelt by the bones, his face grim. These are recent. Hours, perhaps. The entity is escalating, growing bolder. Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made Kaya shiver. It's not just taken, my dear. It's showing us. It wants us to see, to fear. A sound broke the silence, a low, keening wail from the back of the church. Kaya's hatchet snapped up, her flashlight flickering as she aimed it at the shadows. A figure huddled in the corner, an old woman in a tattered shawl, her eyes wide with terror. It was Mabel, the town's seamstress, one of the few who'd ever shown Kaya kindness. Mabel! Kaya rushed to her, kneeling beside her. What happened? Mabel's voice was a rasp, her hands trembling as she clutched Kaya's arm. It came, last night, from the marsh. Took 'em all, Tom, Sarah, the kids, dragged 'em screaming into the fog. I hid, but I heard it, whispering my name. Holmes crouched beside them, his voice sharp. What did it look like? Mabel's eyes darted to the shadows as if expecting it to appear. Tall, wrong. Eyes like fire, but black. It moved like water, but it wasn't. It sang. A song that hurt, like it was pulling my soul out. Miss Marple's face paled, but her voice was steady. A song, you say? In my village, we'd call that a lure. Old things use it to draw their prey. Kaya's heart pounded. The hum, she'd heard it too, whispering her name, pulling at her mind. Did it say anything else? She asked. Mabel's voice dropped to a whisper. It said, Kaya knows. It said you'd bring it what it wants. Kaya recoiled, her blood running cold. Me? I don't know anything. Holmes's eyes locked onto hers. But you do, Miss Clark. The letter named you. The marsh speaks to you. Whatever this is, it's tied to you, your past, your life here. The hum surged, a scream now shaking the church. The windows rattled and the fog pressed against the glass, its tendrils curling like fingers. Mabel whimpered, curling tighter, into herself, and Kaya's flashlight died, plunging them into darkness. The symbol on the altar glowed faintly, its oil pulsing like a heartbeat. It's here, Miss Marple whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. Holmes stood, his pistol aimed at the door. Stay close. We need to move. But before they could, the hum became a voice, guttural, ancient, filling the church with words that clawed at Kaya's mind. Kaya, bring me what is mine. The shadows moved, and a shape appeared at the altar, tall, hunched, its limbs too long, its eyes burning through the darkness. It reached out, its clawed hand grazing Mabel's shoulder, and she screamed. A sound cut short as the fog swallowed her, leaving only her shawl behind. Kaya stumbled back, her hatchet raised, her heart racing. Run! She shouted, grabbing Marple's arm and bolting for the door. Holmes fired into the shadows, the shots drowned by the hum, and they spilled into the street, the fog closing in like a trap. The village was gone. The buildings, the docks, the street, all swallowed by the fog, leaving only the marsh, its reeds sharp and black, its water gleaming with oil. The hum laughed, a chorus of voices now chanting Kaya's name, and the footprints circled them, closing in. We're trapped, Kaya gasped, her hatchet trembling in her hand. Holmes's voice was grim. Not trapped, guided. It wants us to follow. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with determination. Then we follow, my dear. But not as prey, as hunters. Kaya nodded, her fear hardening into resolve. The marsh was her home, and she'd fight for it. But as they moved deeper into the fog, the hum whispering her name, she felt it. A pull, deep in her soul, as if the marsh itself were claiming her. Chapter 6. Shadows of the Past. The fog was a prison, its gray walls pressing in on Kaya Clark as she led Sherlock Holmes and Miss Jane Marple through the marsh's twisting paths. The hum was a constant predator, a guttural chant that clawed at her mind whispering her name in a voice that was both foreign and achingly familiar. Kaya. Mine. Bring me what is mine. The air was thick with the stench of rot and blood, the marsh's reeds looming like sentinels, their tips glistening, with black oil that dripped like tears. The village of Barkley Cove was gone, swallowed by the fog, and the marsh had become a labyrinth, its channels and islands shifting as if alive, guiding them deeper into its heart. Kaya's hatchet hung heavy in her hand, its blade a frail comfort against the thing that stalked them. Her flashlight was dead, its batteries drained by the marsh's unnatural hunger, and the locket in her pocket, Lila's locket, felt like a stone, dragging her toward a truth she wasn't ready to face. Holmes walked beside her, his pistol drawn, his sharp eyes cutting through the fog, though even he seemed unnerved by the marsh's relentless malice. Miss Marple followed, her knitted bag clutched tightly, her face pale but resolute, as if the horrors of St. Mary Mead had prepared her for this. "We're being led," Holmes said, his voice low, precise. "The fog, the footprints, the symbols, they're not random. This entity is orchestrating our path, and Barkley Cove was a lure to draw us deeper." Kaya's stomach churned. To where? Holmes's gaze flicked to the shadows where the reeds seemed to pulse with the hum. To the source. The letter spoke of a place where the water forgets. The dead pool was a marker, the ridge a shrine. Now it's taking us to its origin. Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made Kaya's skin crawl. "And it's personal, my dear. It knows you, Kaya. It called you by name. And poor Mabel said it spoke of you. Whatever this is, it's tied to your past." Kaya's throat tightened. Her past was a wound she'd buried deep. Her family's abandonment, her mother's screams, her father's fists, the loneliness that had driven her to the marsh. She'd thought she'd escaped it, built a life among the reeds, but now the marsh itself was turning on her, digging up secrets she'd long forgotten. "I don't know what it wants," she said, her voice hoarse. "I just lived here. I never asked for this." Holmes's eyes locked onto hers, sharp as a blade. "But you're not just anyone, Miss Clark. You've survived here alone where others would have perished. The marsh chose you long before we arrived. The question is why?" The hum surged, a scream that shook the ground, and Kaya stumbled, catching herself on a gnarled root. The fog parted briefly, revealing a clearing ahead, a small island ringed by black water, its center dominated by a massive oak, its branches twisted like claws, its trunk carved with the claw-marked symbol, larger and deeper than any they'd seen. The oil dripped from the carvings, pooling in the mud, and the hum pulsed in time with Kaya's heartbeat, chanting words she could almost understand. "Kaya. Home. Mine. This is it," Kaya whispered, her voice trembling. "I know this place. I came here as a kid when I was running from him." Holmes's brow furrowed. "Him?" Kaya's hands shook, the hatchet trembling. "My pa. He was mean, drunk, violent. I'd hide here when he got bad. This island, it was safe. Or I thought it was." Miss Marple's eyes softened, but there was a sharpness beneath her kindness. "A place of refuge can become a prison, my dear. Old things linger where pain is strongest. This island, it remembers you." Holmes knelt by the oak, examining the symbol. "The carvings are old, but the oil is fresh. This is no coincidence. Your connection to this place, it's why the entity named you." Kaya's mind raced, memories flooding back. Her mother's tear-streaked face, her siblings slipping away one by one, her father's rage, and this island, her sanctuary, where she'd whispered her fears to the marsh. She'd felt it even then, a presence listening, comforting. But now it was different, angry, hungry, claiming her as its own. The hum grew louder, and the fog thickened, coiling around the island like a noose. The water around them churned, black oil bubbling to the surface, and the reeds began to move. Not sway, but move, their tips bending toward the trio as if drawn by an unseen force. Kaya's heart pounded, her eyes scanning the shadows, and there it was. A shape, tall and hunched, its limbs too long, its eyes burning through the fog. It stood at the water's edge, motionless, watching, its presence a weight that crushed the air from her lungs. "Don't look at it," Holmes snapped, his pistol raised. "It feeds on your fear." Kaya tore her gaze away, but the hum was in her head now, filling it with images. Her father's fist, her mother's screams, and something else, something older. A shadow in the marsh that had watched her all those years ago, waiting. She clutched the locket, Lila's terrified face flashing in her mind, and a new memory surfaced, sharp and painful. A night on this island, a child's desperate prayer, and a voice answering from the dark. "I've heard it before," Kaya whispered, her voice breaking. "When I was a kid, I was scared, hiding from Pa. I asked the marsh to protect me, and something answered." Holmes's eyes widened, a rare flicker of surprise. "You spoke to it?" Kaya nodded, her hands trembling. "I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just the marsh, my friend, but it was alive. It promised to keep me safe, and Pa never found me here." Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it carried a chill. "A bargain, my dear. Old things love bargains, especially with the desperate. You gave it something even if you didn't know it." Kaya's stomach dropped. "Gave it what?" Before Marple could answer, the hum became a scream, splitting the air. The oak trembled, its branches twisting like limbs, and the oil in the carvings pulsed, spilling over the roots. The shape at the water's edge moved, stepping onto the island, its clawed feet leaving fresh prints in the mud. Kaya's flashlight flickered back to life, its beam catching the thing's form. Skin like blackened bark, limbs that bent at wrong angles, eyes that burned with a hunger older than time. Holmes fired, the shot swallowed by the hum, and the shape vanished, melting into the fog. But the ground shook and the oil pooled faster, forming a circle around the oak, its surface rippling with faces. Lila, Tom, Mabel, and others, their mouths open in silent screams. Kaya gasped, stumbling back, her hatchet falling to the mud. "It's showing us," Miss Marple said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Its victims. Its power." Holmes grabbed Kaya's arm, pulling her to her feet. "We need to move. This island is its domain. We're too exposed." But the fog tightened, the reeds closing in, and the hum chanted louder, filling Kaya's mind with memories. Her childhood, her loneliness, the night she'd begged the marsh for help. And then, a new image. A figure in the dark, tall and hunched, offering her safety in exchange for something she couldn't remember giving. The locket burned in her pocket, and she realized, Lila, Tom, the others, they weren't random. They were tied to her, to this island, to the bargain she'd made as a child. "We can't run," Kaya said, her voice hardening. "It's me. It wants. I have to face it." Holmes's jaw tightened. "You face it, you die. We need a plan, Miss Clark, evidence, strategy. Running headlong into this is suicide." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. "She's right, Mr. Holmes. The entity is bound to her. But we can use that. If it wants Kaya, we can draw it out. On our terms." The hum laughed, a sound that shook the island, and the fog parted, revealing a path leading deeper into the marsh. The footprints were there, circling the oak, leading into the water, and the shape appeared again, its eyes burning through the mist, beckoning. Kaya gripped her hatchet, her fear melting into resolve. "We follow it," she said. "To whatever's waiting." Holmes nodded, his pistol ready. "Then we go together. But be ready, Miss Clark. The past is never as buried as we think." As they stepped onto the path, the hum surged, and the marsh closed in, its shadows whispering secrets Kaya had tried to forget. The island was behind them, but its weight clung to her, a reminder that the marsh had always known her, and it wasn't letting go. Chapter 7. A study in motives, the marsh was a predator, its fog a snare that tightened with every step Kaya Clark took. The path from the island twisted through reeds that loomed like specters, their tips dripping black oil that hissed when it hit the water. The hum was a living thing now, a chorus of voices that clawed at Kaya's mind, chanting her name in a language that felt like a memory she couldn't grasp. Kaya, mine. Give me what is owed. The air was thick with rotten blood, the stench so strong it coated her throat, and the locket in her pocket, Lila's locket, burned against her skin, a reminder of the marsh's hunger and her own buried past. Sherlock. Holmes led the way, his pistol drawn, his sharp eyes piercing the fog. Mud clung to his coat, but his posture remained rigid, as if defying the marsh's attempt to break him. Miss Jane Marple followed, her knitted bag clutched tightly, the handkerchief, with the black oil tucked inside like a relic of their enemy. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a quiet fire, as if the horrors of St. Mary Mead had steeled her for this. Kaya brought up the rear, her hatchet in hand, her heart pounding with the weight of the island's revelations. Her childhood, bargain, the voice that had answered her pleas, the entity that now claimed her as its own. We're being manipulated, Holmes said, his voice low and precise, cutting through the hum. The footprints, the symbols, the disappearances, they're not random. This entity has a purpose, a motive, and it's centered on you, Miss Clark. Kaya's throat tightened. I didn't ask for this, she said, her voice hoarse. I was a kid, scared, hiding from my pa. I didn't know what I was talking to. Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it carried a chill that made Kaya's skin crawl. Old things don't care for innocence, my dear. They thrive on need, on desperation. You gave it something, whether you meant to or not, and now it's collecting. Kaya's mind raced, memories clawing to the surface. Her father's drunken rage, her mother's broken sobs, the nights she'd fled to the marsh, whispering her fears to the water. The island had been her refuge, but now it was a trap, its oaken symbols a shrine to the thing she'd unwittingly summoned. The locket and pocket felt heavier, Lila's terrified face etched in her mind, and she wondered how many others had been taken because of her. The path descended into a sunken channel, the water black and still, reflecting the fog like a mirror. The hum pulsed louder, its rhythm erratic like a heartbeat on the edge of collapse. The reeds parted, revealing a clearing dominated by a circle of stones, each carved with the claw-marked symbol, their surfaces slick with oil. At the center stood a gnarled stump, its roots twisting into the mud like veins, and the air around it shimmered as if reality itself were fraying. This is another nexus, Holmes said, his pistol sweeping the shadows. The symbols, the oil, they're conduits, amplifying the entity's presence. Kaya's flashlight flickered, its beam catching something in the mud, a child's shoe half buried, its laces caked with oil. Her breath caught. She knew that shoe. It was hers, from years ago, left behind during one of her escapes to the marsh. This is mine, she whispered, her voice trembling. I lost it when I was 7, hiding from Pa. Holmes knelt, examining the shoe without touching it. It's been preserved, untouched by decay. This is deliberate, a message meant for you. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp with unease. It's showing you its memory, my dear. It knows your past, every moment you spent in this marsh. It's been watching you all these years. The hum surged, a scream that shook the stones, and the oil in the carvings pulsed, spilling over the roots. Kaya's head throbbed, images flooding her mind, her childhood, the island, the night she'd begged the marsh for safety. But now there was more. A figure in the dark, tall and hunched, its eyes burning as it whispered promises of protection. She saw herself, small and terrified, nodding to its terms, not understanding what she was giving. The locket burned hotter, and she realized Lila, Tom, Mabel, the others. They were payment sacrifices for the bargain she'd made. I didn't know, Kaya said, her voice breaking. I was just a kid. Holmes's gaze was unrelenting. Intent is irrelevant, Miss Clark. The entity believes you owe it, and it's collecting. The question is what, or who it wants next. Miss Marple's hand touched Kaya's arm, her voice soft but firm. We can break the bargain, my dear. Old things are bound by rules. If we find what it truly wants, we can turn its hunger against it. The hum laughed, a guttural sound that shook the clearing, and the fog tightened, coiling around the stones like a noose. Kaya's flashlight died, plunging them into darkness, and the oil in the carvings glowed, casting shadows that moved, like living things. The shape appeared again at the edge of the clearing, tall, hunched, its limbs too long, its eyes burning through the fog. It didn't move, but its presence was a weight, crushing the air from Kaya's lungs. "Don't look at it," Holmes snapped, his pistol aimed at the shape. "It's trying to break you." Kaya tore her gaze away, but the hum was in her head now, chanting louder, "Kaya, give me what is owed." The images returned, her father's fist, her mother's screams, and the figure in the dark, offering safety for a price. But now she saw more. Other faces, not just Lila and the villagers, but her family. Her mother, her siblings, all gone, all taken by the marsh. Had they been part of the bargain too? The ground trembled and the oil pooled faster, forming a circle around the stump. The stones began to hum, their symbols pulsing in time with Kaya's heartbeat, and the air shimmered, revealing glimpses of the past, her childhood, her loneliness, the marsh's embrace. But the marsh wasn't kind, it was hungry, and it had been feeding on her pain all these years. "We need to destroy it," Kaya said, her voice hardening. She grabbed her hatchet, stepping toward the stump, but Holmes caught her arm. "Not yet," he said, his voice sharp. "We don't know its rules. Destroying this could strengthen it or trap us here." Miss Marple nodded, pulling the handkerchief from her bag. The black oil inside glistened, alive with movement. "This is its essence, Mr. Holmes. If we can understand it, we can fight it, but we need time." The hum screamed and the shape moved, stepping into the clearing. Its clawed feet left fresh prints in the mud, and its eyes burned brighter, locking onto Kaya. It spoke not with words, but with the hum, filling her mind with a demand. "Give me what is owed." The images surged. Her family, the villagers, and now Holmes and Marple, their faces twisted in terror, sinking into the marsh. Kaya screamed, dropping to her knees, her hatchet falling. Holmes fired, the shots swallowed by the hum, and the shape vanished. But the fog thickened and the stones glowed brighter, their oil spilling into the water. The clearing shook and the stump began to crack, revealing a hollow within filled with bones, human, animal, and something else, their surfaces carved with symbols, glistening with oil. "It's a vault," Holmes said, his voice tense. "A repository for its offerings." Miss Marple's eyes widened. "And a gateway. This is where it crosses, where it feeds." Kaya's vision blurred, the hum drowning her thoughts. She saw herself as a child standing by the stump, whispering her fears, and the figure answering, its claws reaching for her soul. She'd given it something. Her pain, her fear, her family. And now it wanted more. It wanted her. "We have to go," Kaya gasped, scrambling to her feet. "It's too strong here." Holmes nodded, his pistol still raised. "Back to the path. We need distance to plan." But as they turned, the fog parted, revealing no path, only water, black, and still surrounding the clearing. The footprints were everywhere, circling them, and the hum laughed, a chorus of voices chanting Kaya's name. The shape appeared again, closer now, its eyes burning with hunger, and Kaya knew they weren't escaping. "Not yet. We fight," she said, gripping her hatchet, her fear melting into resolve. "Whatever it wants, it's not getting me." Holmes's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. "That's the spirit, Miss Clark. But we fight smart. Observe, deduce, strike." Miss Marple's voice was steady, her prayer book open. "And we pray, Mr. Holmes, for courage, if nothing else." The hum surged, and the marsh closed in, its shadows twisting into claws, its water rising like a tide. Kaya stood her ground, the locket burning in her pocket, the past a weight she could no longer ignore. The entity wanted her, but she'd fight for her life. And for the marsh she'd once called home. Chapter 8. The Hidden Trail. The marsh was a labyrinth of hunger, its fog a shroud that clung to Kaya Clark's skin like a second shadow. The clearing with its circle of stones and bone-filled stump lay behind them, but its weight followed, a suffocating presence that pulsed with the hum, a guttural chant that wove her name into its rhythm. Kaya. Mine. Pay what is owed. The air was thick with the stench of rot, blood, and that sickly sweet decay, now laced with something sharper, like burnt bone. The locket in Kaya's pocket, Lila's locket, burned hotter, a tether to the marsh's victims and the bargain she'd made as a child, its price now coming due. Sherlock Holmes moved ahead, his pistol drawn, his sharp eyes cutting through the fog's gray veil. His coat was tattered, streaked with mud and oil, but his posture remained unyielding, as if daring the marsh to break him. Miss Jane Marple followed, her knitted bag clutched tightly, the handkerchief with the black oil inside a grim reminder of the entity's essence. Her face was pale, her eyes sharp with a wisdom that saw beyond the fog, as if the secrets of St. Mary Mead had taught her to read the darkness. "We're not escaping," Holmes said, his voice low and precise, slicing through the hum. "The water surrounding the clearing, it's no accident. The entity is forcing us onto a specific path, one it's chosen." Kaya's heart pounded, her hatchet trembling in her hand. A path to where? Holmes's gaze flicked to the shadows, where the reeds seemed to pulse with the hum. To its heart. The symbols, the bones, the oil, they're markers leading us to the source of its power. But it's a trap, Miss Clark. It wants us to follow. Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it carried a chill that made Kaya's skin crawl. "And it wants you most of all, my dear. The bargain you made, it's not finished. Old things like this don't forget and they don't forgive." Kaya's throat tightened, memories clawing at her. Her childhood, her father's rage, the island where she'd whispered her fears to the marsh, and the voice that had answered, promising safety for a price she hadn't understood. The locket, burned. Lila's face flashing in her mind along with the others. Tom, Mabel, her own family, all taken by the marsh. She'd thought she was alone, but the entity had been there, watching, waiting, feeding on her pain. The fog parted, revealing a narrow trail that hadn't been there moments before. A hidden path of packed earth, winding through reeds that leaned inward, their tips sharp and glistening with oil. The hum pulsed louder, its rhythm a heartbeat, and the footprints were there. Clawed, too long, with that unnatural extra digit leading into the dark. Kaya's flashlight was useless, drained by the marsh's hunger, but the oil in the footprints glowed faintly, lighting the way like a lure. "This is it," Kaya said, her voice hoarse. "The hidden trail. I've heard stories, old ones from the fishermen. They said it leads to a place no one comes back from." Holmes's eyes narrowed, his pistol sweeping the path. "Then we proceed with caution. The entity is guiding us, but we can turn its game against it. Observe, deduce, strike." Miss Marple's hand tightened on her bag, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "In my village, we'd say this is a path to the underworld. Not hell, mind you, but something older. Something that takes what it's owed and gives nothing back." Kaya gripped her hatchet, her fear hardening into resolve. "We don't have a choice. If it wants me, I'll face it. But I'm not going alone." The trail was treacherous, the mud slick with oil that seemed to writhe underfoot. The reeds closed, in their tips brushing Kaya's arms, leaving streaks of oil that burned like ice. The hum was a chorus now, voices overlapping, chanting words she couldn't grasp but felt in her bones. Kaya. Home. Mine. The air grew colder, the stench sharper, and the shadows moved, flickering with shapes, limbs, eyes, faces that vanished when she looked directly. Half a mile in, the trail widened, revealing a sunken grove, its center dominated by a pool of black water, its surface still as glass. The reeds around it were blackened, their tips curled like claws, and the ground was scarred with symbols, circles with 3 jagged lines, dozens of them, radiating from the pool like a web. At the water's edge lay a pile of objects, rusted, fishing hooks, a child's doll, a blood-stained shawl, all relics of the marsh's victims, arranged like offerings. Kaya's breath caught. The shawl was Mabel's, The doll, one she'd seen in Lila's boat years ago. Her own childhood shoe was there too, its laces glistening with oil. "It's collecting," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Everything it takes." Holmes knelt by the pool, his fingers hovering over the water. This is another nexus, like the ridge, the clearing, the oil. It's alive, a conduit for the entity's power. He dipped a finger into the water, then recoiled, his skin red and blistered. "It's corrosive, not natural." Miss Marple's eyes widened, her voice sharp. "Look, my dear. There, in the water." Kaya followed her gaze. The pool's surface shimmered, reflecting not the fog but images. Her childhood, her mother's tear-streaked face, her father's fist, the island where she'd made her bargain. But there was more. Other faces, villagers she'd known, their eyes wide with terror as they sank into the marsh. And then her own face, older, staring back with eyes that weren't hers, black, burning, like the entity's. "It's showing me," Kaya said, her voice breaking. "It's showing me what it wants." Holmes's jaw tightened. "It's manipulating you, Miss Clark. It feeds on your guilt, your fear. Don't let it." But the hum surged, a scream that shook the grove, and the pool churned, black oil bubbling, to the surface. The images shifted, showing Kaya as a child, whispering to the marsh, and the entity answering. Tall, hunched, its claws reaching for her soul. She saw the bargain now, clear as day. Safety for her pain, her family, her life. The locket burned hotter, and she realized the entity wasn't just taking, it was claiming her, piece by piece. The reeds moved, their tips bending toward the trio, and the footprints appeared, circling the pool. The shape emerged from the fog, tall, hunched, its limbs too long, its eyes burning with hunger. It didn't move, but its presence was a weight, crushing the air from Kaya's lungs. "Dang," Hum spoke, filling her mind. "Kaya, give me." "You," Kaya screamed, her hatchet raised, but Holmes grabbed her arm. "Not yet. We need to understand its motive. Why you, why now?" Miss Marple's voice was steady, her prayer book open. "It's a debt, Mr. Holmes. Kaya gave it her pain, but it wants more. Her soul, perhaps, or something greater." The shape stepped closer, its claws leaving fresh prints, and the pool glowed, the images shifting to show Holmes and Marple, their faces twisted in terror, sinking into the marsh. Kaya's heart raced. "It's not just me," she said, her voice hoarse. "It wants all of us." Holmes fired, the shot swallowed by the hum, and the shape vanished. But the fog thickened, and the reeds closed in, their tips dripping oil that burned the ground. The pool churned faster, and the hum became a chorus chanting louder. "Kaya, mine, now. We need to move," Kaya said, her voice hardening. She grabbed the shawl and the doll, shoving them into her satchel. "These are clues. We take them and go." Holmes nodded, his pistol ready. "The trail continues. We follow it, but we stay sharp. It's testing us." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with resolve. "And we test it back, my dear. Every hunter leaves a trail, even one as old as this." The trail led deeper, the fog a living thing that whispered Kaya's name. The hum followed, its voices growing stronger, and the marsh closed in, its shadows twisting into claws. Kaya gripped her hatchet, the locket burning in her pocket, the past a chain she couldn't break. The entity wanted her, but she'd fight. For herself, for the villagers, for the marsh she'd once loved. Chapter 9. Secrets of the Manor. The marsh was a living trap, its fog a noose that tightened around Kaya Clark with every step along the hidden trail. The hum pulsed like a heartbeat, its guttural chant weaving her name into a litany of hunger. "Kaya, mine. Pay what is owed." The air was thick with the stench of rot, blood, and that sickly sweet decay, now laced with a charnel house reek. Like bones burning in a forgotten fire, the locket in Kaya's pocket, Lila's locket, burned against her skin, a tether to the marsh's victims and the bargain she'd made as a child, its price now a debt she couldn't escape. Sherlock Holmes led the way, his pistol drawn, his sharp eyes cutting through the fog's gray shroud. His coat was tattered, streaked with mud and black oil, but his resolve was unbroken, a beacon in the marsh's oppressive gloom. Miss Jane Marple followed, her knitted bag clutched tightly, the handkerchief with the black oil and the relics from the grove, Lila's doll, Mabel's shawl, tucked inside like talismans against the darkness. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a quiet intensity, as if the mysteries of St. Mary Mead had honed her for this battle. "We're being drawn deeper," Holmes said, his voice low and precise, slicing through the hum. "The trail, the symbols, the relics, they're leading us to the entity's core. This is no random path." Kaya's heart pounded, her hatchet trembling in her hand. To what? Another shrine? Holmes's gaze flicked to the shadows where the reeds pulsed with the hum. Something greater. The grove was a waypoint, the clearing a vault. This trail leads to the heart of its power, a place where its motives will be clear. Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it carried a chill that made Kaya's skin crawl. "And it's personal, my dear. The entity knows you, Kaya. Your pain, your past, it's not just claiming you, it's claiming what you represent." Kaya's throat tightened. The memories from the grove, her childhood, her father's rage, the island where she'd begged the marsh for safety, were raw, bleeding wounds. The entity had answered her then, offering protection for a price she hadn't understood. Now it was collecting, taking Lila, Tom, Mabel, and perhaps her own family, their faces haunting her in the pool's visions. The locket burned hotter, a reminder of her guilt, and she wondered what else she'd given without knowing. The trail twisted through the marsh, the reeds closing in like claws, their tips dripping oil that hissed in the water. The fog thickened and the hum grew louder, its voices overlapping, chanting words that clawed at Kaya's mind. Kaya, home, mine. The footprints were everywhere, clawed, too long with that unnatural extra digit, circling the trail, leading them onward. Then the fog parted, revealing a structure looming in the distance. A derelict manor, its walls sagging under the weight of time, its windows black and shattered, its roof half collapsed into the marsh. The symbols were carved into its walls, glowing with oil, and the hum pulsed from within, a heartbeat that shook the earth. "The manor," Kaya whispered, her voice trembling. "I've heard stories, old ones from before I was born. They said it belonged to a family who owned the marsh, long gone. People said it was cursed, that no one who went inside came out." Holmes's eyes narrowed, his pistol sweeping the manor's silhouette. "A focal point like the ridge in the grove, this is no coincidence. The entity's power is strongest here." Miss Marple's voice was sharp with unease. "In St. Mary Mead, we'd call this a place of old sins. My dear, buildings like this, they hold memories and not the pleasant kind. This manor is its lair." Kaya gripped her hatchet, her fear hardening into resolve. "Then we go in. If this is its heart, we find out what it wants." The manor's gate hung crooked, its iron rusted and slick with oil. The hum was deafening now, a chorus of voices that filled Kaya's head with images. Her childhood, the island, the bargain, and now the manor, its halls echoing with screams she couldn't place. The air was colder here, the stench of rot and blood so strong it made her gag. The footprints led to the door, which stood ajar, swinging in the windless air, beckoning them inside. Holmes pushed the door open, his pistol raised. "Stay close. Whatever's inside, it's expecting us." The manor's interior was a ruin, its floors warped, its walls coated with oil that dripped like blood. The symbols were everywhere, carved into the wood, painted in oil, glowing faintly, in the dark. The hum pulsed from deeper within and the air shimmered as if reality were fraying. Kaya's flashlight flickered, its beam catching relics scattered across the floor. A rusted locket, a child's toy, a blood-stained glove. All markers of the marsh's victims, arranged like trophies. "This is its gallery," Holmes said, his voice tense. "A record of its takings." Kaya's heart pounded, her eyes drawn to a portrait on the wall, its frame cracked but intact. It showed a family, Parents, children, their faces stern, their eyes eerily familiar. One face stood out, a girl no older than Kaya had been, her expression haunted, her hands clutching a locket identical to the one in Kaya's pocket. "That's not Lila," Kaya whispered, her voice breaking. "But it's the same locket." "Miss..." Marple's eyes widened, her voice soft but sharp. "A family, my dear. This manor belonged to them and they're tied to the entity. The locket, it's a link passed down through time." Holmes examined the portrait, his fingers tracing the frame. "The symbols are carved here, older than the others. This family, they knew the entity, perhaps served it. The locket is a key, but to what?" The hum surged, a scream that shook the manor, and the oil in the symbols pulsed, spilling onto the floor. Kaya's head throbbed, images flooding her mind. The girl in the portrait whispering to the marsh just as Kaya had done. She saw the family, their faces twisted in terror, sinking into the water, and the entity, tall and hunched, claiming them as its own. The locket burned, and Kaya realized it wasn't just Lila's, it was hers, the girl's, the family's, a chain binding them to the marsh's hunger. The floor creaked, and the shape appeared at the end of the hall. Tall, hunched, its limbs too long, its eyes burning through the dark. It didn't move, but its presence was a weight, crushing the air from Kaya's lungs. The hum spoke, filling her mind. "Kaya, you are the last. Give me what is owed." Kaya screamed, her hatchet raised, but Holmes grabbed her arm. "Don't, it's baiting you. We need to find the source. Something in this manor holds its power." Miss Marple's voice was steady, her prayer book open. "The basement, Mr. Holmes. Old houses like this, they keep their secrets below." The hum laughed, and the shape stepped closer, its claws leaving fresh prints in the oil-slicked floor. The walls trembled, and the relics began to move, sliding toward the shape as if drawn by an unseen force. Kaya's locket burned hotter, and she saw it. The girl in the portrait, her face merging with her own, her eyes black and burning. "We go down," Kaya said, her voice hardening. She grabbed the locket from the portrait, shoving it into her satchel with the others. "Whatever's in the basement, it's what it's protecting." Holmes nodded, his pistol ready. "Lead the way, Miss Clark, but be ready, it's waiting." The stairs to the basement were hidden behind a rotting door, their steps slick with oil. The hum was deafening, a chorus of voices chanting Kaya's name, and the air grew colder, the stench overwhelming. As they descended, the manor seemed to close in, its walls pulsing with the hum, its shadows twisting into claws. Kaya gripped her hatchet, the lockets burning in her satchel, the past a weight she couldn't escape. The entity wanted her, but she'd fight. For herself, for the villagers, for the marsh she'd once called home. Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. The basement of the derelict manor was a tomb, its air thick with the stench of rot, blood, and the acrid tang of burning bone. Kaya Clark descended the slick, oil-smeared stairs, her hatchet trembling in her hand, the weight of the lockets in her satchel. Lila's, the girl from the portrait, and others, pulling at her like a chain to the marsh's hunger. The hum was a deafening scream now, a chorus of ancient voices chanting her name. "Kaya, mine. Pay what is owed." The walls pulsed with the sound, their surfaces carved with claw-marked symbols that glowed with black oil, as if the manor itself were alive, breathing with the entity's malice. Sherlock Holmes followed close behind, his pistol drawn, his sharp eyes scanning the darkness. His coat was tattered, streaked with mud and oil, but his resolve was a blade, cutting through the fog's oppressive weight. Miss Jane Marple brought up the rear, her knitted bag clutched tightly, the handkerchief with the black oil and the relics from the grove tucked inside like weapons against the unknown. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a quiet fire, as if the mysteries of St. Mary Mead had prepared her for this final confrontation. "We're at the heart," Holmes said, his voice low and precise, barely audible over the hum. "The symbols, the oil, the relics, they converge here. This is where the entity's power is anchored." Kaya's heart pounded, her throat tight with fear and resolve. "And it's where it ends." The memories from the manor's upper halls, her childhood, the island, the bargain she'd made with the marsh were raw, bleeding wounds. The entity had answered her as a child, offering safety for a price she hadn't understood. And now it was collecting. Lila, Tom, Mabel, her own family, all taken as payment. The lockets burned in her satchel, a reminder of the debt she carried, and the hum's chant grew clearer, its words a demand. Kaya, you are the last. Give me what is owed. Miss Marple's voice was soft, but it carried a chill that made Kaya's skin crawl. This is no ordinary place, my dear. In St. Mary Mead, we'd call it a gate, a threshold to something older than the earth. The entity lives here, and it's been waiting for you. The basement opened into a cavernous chamber, its walls slick with oil, its floor a mosaic of symbols, circles with 3 jagged lines, radiating from a central pit filled with black, water that shimmered like a mirror. Bones littered the ground, human, animal, and something else, their surfaces carved with symbols, glistening with oil. At the pit's edge stood an altar, crude and ancient, its stone stained with blood and oil, a massive claw-marked symbol carved into its surface. The hum pulsed from the pit, a heartbeat that shook the chamber, and the air shimmered, as if reality were unraveling. This is it, Kaya whispered, her voice trembling. The source. Holmes knelt by the altar, his fingers hovering over the oil-slicked stone. The bones, the symbols, they're offerings, anchoring the entity to this place. But there's something more, a ritual incomplete. Kaya's eyes were drawn to the pit, its surface reflecting not the chamber but images. Her childhood, her mother's screams, her father's fists, the island where she'd made her bargain. But now there was more, a lineage, faces stretching, back through time, all tied to the marsh, all whispering to the entity, offering pain for power. The girl from the portrait was there, her locket gleaming, and Kaya saw herself, her face merging with the girl's, her eyes black and burning. I'm part of it, Kaya said, her voice breaking. The family in the manor, they served it, fed it, and I'm the last of them. Holmes's gaze locked onto hers, sharp as a blade. A bloodline, Miss Clark. The entity is bound to it, and you're its final link. The bargain you made, it wasn't just yours, it was theirs, passed down through generations. Miss Marple's eyes widened, her voice sharp with urgency. A pact, Mr. Holmes. Old things love pacts, and this one has been feeding on this family for centuries. Kaya's pain, her loneliness. It was the final offering, waking it fully. The hum surged, a scream that shook the chamber, and the oil in the symbols pulsed, spilling into the pit. The water churned, black oil bubbling to the surface, and the shape appeared, tall, hunched, its limbs too long, its eyes burning with a hunger older than time. It stood at the pit's edge, its claws dripping oil, its presence a weight that crushed the air from Kaya's lungs. The hum spoke, filling her mind. Kaya, you are mine. The last. Kaya screamed, her hatchet raised, but the images in the pit surged. Her family, the villagers, Holmes and Marple, all sinking into the marsh, their faces twisted in terror. The lockets burned hotter, and she saw the truth. The entity wasn't just taking her pain. It wanted her soul, her blood, the final piece of a ritual begun centuries ago by the manor's family. Holmes fired, the shot swallowed by the hum, and the shape stepped closer, its claws leaving fresh prints in the oil-slicked floor. We need to break the ritual, he said, his voice tense. The altar, the pit, they're the anchor. Destroy them and we weaken it. Miss Marple nodded, her prayer book open, her voice steady. But it's bound to Kaya, Mr. Holmes. To break the ritual, she must renounce the bargain. Give it nothing. More. Kaya's heart raced, her mind flooded with memories, the island, the voice, the promise of safety. She'd given it her pain, her fear, her family, but it wanted more. It wanted her. How do I renounce it? She asked, her voice hoarse. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with resolve. Face it, my dear. Name it. Deny it. Old things are bound by words, by will. You must be stronger than your fear. The shape lunged, its claws slashing through the air, and Kaya dove aside, her hatchet striking the altar. The stone cracked, oil spilling like blood, and the hum screamed, a sound that tore at her mind. Holmes fired again, aiming for the pit, and the water churned, faces rising. Lila, Tom, Mabel, her mother, all screaming for release. Kaya stood, her hatchet raised, her voice trembling but resolute. "I see you," she said, staring into the shape's burning eyes. "I was a child, scared, alone. I gave you my pain, but I take it back. You have no claim on me." The hum faltered, and the shape froze, its eyes flickering. The pit churned faster, the oil rising, and the chamber shook, bones rattling across the floor. Kaya struck the altar again, the crack widening and the hum became a wail, the voices fracturing. Holmes grabbed her satchel, pulling out the lockets and hurling them into the pit. "Break the links," he shouted. Miss Marple chanted, her prayer book raised, her voice a beacon in the dark. "By all that is good, we cast you out. You have no power here." The shape screamed, a sound that shattered the air, and the pit erupted, black oil flooding the chamber. Kaya struck the altar one last time, the stone splitting in two, and the hum died, replaced by a silence so deep it hurt. The shape dissolved, its eyes fading and the oil receded, the pit stilling, the symbols dimming. Kaya collapsed, her hatchet falling, her body trembling. The lockets were gone, the pit empty, the manor silent. Holmes knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "It's over, Miss Clark. You did it." Miss Marple's voice was soft, her eyes warm. "You were stronger than it, my dear. Stronger than your past." But as they climbed the stairs, the fog parting to reveal the marsh, Kaya felt it, a faint hum deep in her bones, whispering one last time. Not yet. The entity was weakened, but not gone, and the marsh was still watching.